Alright guys, so we are on day 3 of Polygons. Yesterday we talked about parallelograms, and we talked about how there are 5 properties of a parallelogram. And so what you have to understand is rhombuses, rectangles, and squares have all 5 properties of a parallelogram. And so what I want you to take a couple minutes is just pause the video and see if you can write down all 5 properties of a parallelogram. Alright, so hopefully you paused the video and you were able to take a look at the 5 properties of parallelogram. And in short, this is what you should have had. Opposite sides parallel, opposite sides congruent, alternating interior, and then same side interior. And then of course diagonals bisect. So the first change we're going to talk about is rectangles. And a rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. Now I bet you're going, now wait a minute, a square has 4 right angles. But the problem with the square, we're going to see about the problem with the square here in a couple minutes. When we write the properties of a rectangle, our first thing that we should be writing is all properties of a parallelogram. So when you see a rectangle, the first thing you should write about it is all properties of a parallelogram. But then you have to write 2 more properties about a rectangle. So a rectangle technically has 3 properties. All properties of a parallelogram, and then it has 4 right angles. And beside that, not only do the diagonals bisect in a rectangle, but the diagonals are congruent. So, not only, like I said, do the diagonals bisect, but they are congruent. And so that's what we're going to focus on when we talk about rectangles. So, on the back here, I have MO is equal to 6x plus 14. And that's from there to there. And then NP is equal to 9x plus 5. So how do we find the value of x? Well, in a rectangle, the diagonals are congruent. So we just set these 2 equal to each other. And so then we get 9 is equal to 3x, x is equal to 3. We plug it back in and check, we get 32, we get 32, and so the diagonals are both have a length of 32. Go ahead and do problem 2. Hopefully what you did was you set 6x plus 4 equal to 7x minus 4. And then when we solve, we get x is equal to 8. So that covers the main rule of a rectangle, is that the diagonals bisect. What's the other rule of a rectangle? Hopefully you said every angle is equal to 90 degrees. So if this angle is equal to 90 degrees, what do I do with 5x plus 8 and 3x plus 2? Well, 5x plus 8 plus 3x plus 2 is equal to 90. And so 8x plus 10 is equal to 90. 8x is equal to 80, x is equal to 10. And so, this angle is equal to 58, and this angle is equal to 32. Well, what angle is 6y plus 2 equal to? Well, remember, the properties of a parallelogram say that alternating interior is true. So 6y plus 2 is equal to 32. And then we should be able to solve for y. And again, it's because this is the alternating interior. And so y is equal to 5. I want you to go ahead and complete this problem that I've got down here. except for I'm going to add in a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and add in, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and add in 5y minus 5 to this one down here. And so I do want you to find x and y. And this is 5y minus 5. So go ahead and pause the video and answer this question. Okay, so hopefully you were able to get 13x plus 25 equals 90, 13x equals 65, x equals 5, and then so 5y minus 5 is equal to 25, so 5y is equal to 30, so y is equal to 6. Hopefully you guys were able to figure that out. Okay, so when you go to the workbook today, questions 14 through 19 are the rectangle questions, and if you notice, it says find the value of x and the length of each diagonal. Well, really, it's just getting you to practice saying the stuff equal to each other, and then solving for x, and then plugging x, the number you get for x, back in, so that you know that the diagonals are congruent. And so 14 through 19 definitely focuses on rectangles. All right. A rhombus is a special type of parallelogram with all four sides congruent. But you're like, wait a minute, that's also a square. You're going to learn something about a square here in a minute, okay? So, a rhombus has all the properties of parallelogram. So that's the first thing you put for a rhombus. You put opposite sides congruent, opposite sides parallel, alternating interior congruent, and SSI supplementary. And then the diagonals bisect. So, besides these 5 properties, rhombuses have 3 others. All 4 sides are congruent. That's the first thing. The diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So we're going to draw that in a picture here in a minute. And then each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So we're going to draw ourselves a rhombus over here. And so if I have a rhombus, then all 4 of those should be congruent. When I draw the diagonals, there will be a right angle here. Now, if there's a right angle here, there's a right angle all through here. So every angle inside is 90 degrees. And that's only going to work with a rhombus and a square. And then not only that, but this angle is congruent to this angle, and it's congruent to both of those. And then these angles are congruent. And again, if you notice, the rhombus just got broken into 4 triangles. Does everybody see that? So there's some pretty simple rules about that we're going to work through. And so then finally, if a quadrilateral is both a rhombus and a rectangle, then it is also a square. So all of the properties of a parallelogram, rhombus, and a rectangle can be applied to squares. So if I ever ask you for the properties of a square, you're going to write 3 things. All properties of a parallelogram, all properties of a rectangle, and then all properties of a rhombus. And then on after the quiz 1, I'm going to show you guys how you fill out the properties of all of these. But a square is the easiest because it's just all properties of, and you just name the other 3. Okay. But what we have to understand is the square's got it all going on. So if I have a square, opposite sides are congruent. Opposite sides are parallel. alternate angles are congruent, and the diagonals bisect each other. So right now, all I've drawn is a parallelogram, but a square has also got the properties of a rectangle. So not only are the angles congruent, but then they're right angles, and now the diagonals are congruent. If a square is a rhombus, then all four sides are congruent. The diagonals are perpendicular, so there's a right angle in there. And every single angle in this picture on the outside is now 45 degrees because they're congruent to each other. So again, squares just got it all going on. 10 different properties, but it's just really a combination of all of them. Okay. So we're going to apply that. And so you're going to look at these pictures and you're going to tell me, and we're going to work through these together. You're going to tell me whether or not these are a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square. And then you have to explain which property makes it a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square. Okay? I will tell you that there are 2 rhombuses, 2 rectangles, and 1 square. So go ahead and pause the video and answer 1 through 5. Okay, so hopefully you're able to get this. This is a rectangle because it has 4 right angles but not 4 congruent sides. This is a square because it had all the properties. This is a rhombus because it had 4 congruent sides and not 4 right angles. And then rectangle, same as number 1. Rhombus, same as number 3. Okay. Now, the next thing on here was to complete 6 through 13, and then we've already talked about 14 through 19, and then 20 through 27. So we're going to talk about, just some basic things. On 6 through 13, I want you to be able to name all the angles. So I'm going to do number 8 because number 8 kind of covers everything that we've been talking about with in regards to all of the stuff. And I'm going to start with angle 2. The reason why I started with angle 2 is because angle 2 is in a rhombus, and so angle 2 is 90 degrees. And I bet you're like, okay, well now I'm done. Except for I can figure out angle 1 because angle 1 is part of a triangle, okay? And how many degrees are in a triangle? 180. And so angle 1 has to be 70 degrees. If angle 1 is 70 degrees because of the triangle, we now also know angle 3 and angle 4. A rhombus splits these angles so that they're all 4 congruent. So every angle here is 20 degrees. Every angle in here is 90. So then angle 1, 3, and 4, well, if angle 1 is 70, angle 3 and angle 4 are also 70. Okay? So I think if you understand what I did there, you should be able to finish 6 through 13 and pretty easily. There's only going to be 3 angles in the picture, and one of them is going to be 90 for sure, and then the other one you just have to find through doing your angle addition and then subtracting from 180. So go ahead and do 6 through 13. We've already talked about 14 through 19. 20 through 24, again, just name what kind of quadrilateral is it? What kind of parallelogram is this? Rectangle, rhombus, or square? And then in 25 through 28, you're just working on setting things congruent to each other that are congruent and solving for the missing variable. And then make sure you tell me how long each side is. Okay? All right, so then obviously on page 161, you should be able to do 1 through 6 pretty easily, but up to you. Any questions? Come see me.